Good evening. You are now listening to the worldwide transmission of the GBC with the Honorable WMII.
Welcome to the GBC. We have a lot of great stories for you tonight. But first off, I would like to, as always, give thanks to our great partners at Preach the Word Worldwide Network. They are phenomenal. I really appreciate what they have been doing for us. Also, we would like to give a shout out to Debo Studios, in addition with all of our sponsors and partners that most definitely are supporting us. Now, I will say that we have had a lot of things go on in the world in the news today, and just thinking there's a whole litany of stuff that we can cover. I was trying to formulate in my mind which direction we should go, given that the fact that there is so much news out there. Today, President Trump has a rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in commemoration of the Juneteenth. There's some backlash about that, and there are some people that are supportive of it. As a president, it looks very good that you're trying to have an olive branch to the black community, but there are some folks who don't want that to happen. If you understand the story of Black Wall Street and what happened in their buildings being burnt down and just destroyed over a rumor, it's really, really sad. And the sad thing about it is, I also say that a lot of history that has happened in the black community is not even known of. A lot of us had no idea what a Juneteenth was. We always were told about the 4th of July, Independence Day. But during that time, it was Independence Day, the black population was enslaved. So who was it independent for? That's the question we must ask ourselves. Juneteenth, when it happened, it was kind of kept on the hush. There are some groups who have put it out there and tried to keep it alive, but for the most part, the country had no idea what a Juneteenth was. So today we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. There's a great array of stories that I have to cover, but I'm going to do my best for you to formulate this and put it together so that you can have a good understanding of what's been going on in the world these past week. Now, across the country, there's some elections going on for local governments, and I think it's a good thing because there are a lot of black politicians or black people getting into politics that are trying to go into councils and trying to get elected on city councils and mayor races. That's been going on very heavily in the country. And I have a story here about a person who is running for mayor, and they're getting a little bit of backlash about it. But nevertheless, I think it's great that you have a lot of black people getting in the arena trying to change things in their community. Now, I remember years ago, I was eating breakfast. I used to frequent this breakfast place here in my town, and there were some movers and shakers that sat across from me. And at the time, there wasn't too many black people in politics in the political arena. But these two gentlemen, and they were not black folks, but these two gentlemen talked with me, and they was asking me about getting into politics and getting into the local government and the council. They was just kind of wanting to see where I was on that. And they told me something that they said that, there's getting ready to be a change. This was some years back. And they told me that there's getting ready to be a great change in Florence where they were looking for fresh, quote unquote, faces. So I understood the language that the person was telling me, that they were looking for more black people to get into the political field. So sure enough, years later, I'm seeing a slew of black people getting into county council, city council, mayoral races, and it's just not in my city. It's going on nationwide. So, with that, if you're getting in that type of field, there's going to be some mudslinging. And that's going to start on our first story tonight. It says a political stunt. Florence City Council describes what happened during an emergency meeting. So, here's our backstory here. There is a black woman who is running for mayor. Her name is Teresa Irvin, and she's competing against a George Bailey. And, Mrs. Irvin, she had about 47% of the vote. To win it, an overwhelming majority, you have to have 50%. So given the fact that she had 47% of the vote, her opponent and her has to have a runoff election. That's a lot of times you hear about runoffs and you're wondering, this person has such and such percent, and it's more than everybody else. Why are they running off? But the key is you have to have 50% to really have that fully knocked off and be the full winner of that election. So we're going to read a little bit here. It says, a political stunt. Florence City Council member used those words to describe what happened during Wednesday's emergency meeting. The meeting called to discuss a matter that could bring more money into the county. And the person, George Bailey, is running up against Mrs. Teresa Irvin. And, they talked about a penny sales tax was been helping the area. And it says the penny sales tax has been in place since 2006 and has led to multiple city projects, which included fixing roads, adding fire stations, and upgrading other governments. So, those taxes, they really do help the community be a better place, such as having good roads and all those little things. So when you pay taxes, you want to see where the money is going. It says, what started as a peaceful discussion led to an argument between Democratic mayor candidates George Bailey and Teresa Irvin, who are also city council members. So they're going back and forth competing for that Democratic mayor spot. Now, there is a Republican that they do have to run against later on in the year, but these guys are trying to get that top Democratic spot. And it said, Irvin talked about the special commission Florence County asked to look into the new extension. She brought up Bailey's brother, who is on the special commission, and says it was brought up for clarification and nothing else. Mrs. Irvin said it's simply transparency and the information that was discussed, and the question I asked was about information in the newspaper. But Councilman Bailey felt that there was more behind her question than she let on. He was upset that, one of Mr. Bailey's brothers was, he felt kind of brought into question about some information that was in the newspaper. So, I think it's fantastic that you have a black woman running for mayor. There's going to be a lot of mudslinging going on, I'm sure, in this story here, but prayerfully, both candidates, I wish them luck. And Florence, I know South Carolina, I've researched, they don't and have not ever had a African-American being the mayor. So this would be huge news if a county here in the South would win that election. Moving on in our stories. This is from the Christian Post by Mr. Samuel Smith. And it states, if the church had stood up against slavery, we may not be here, a SBC pastor says. And that's from the Southern Baptist Convention. And this is a story here. This young lady's on here, and she's holding a sign which says, My Life Matters. You've been hearing a lot about the My Life Matters and the Black Lives Matter movement. I'll most definitely talk about that at another time. But let's read into the story here. It says the Southern Baptist Convention's Executive Committee had a 1-hour conversation on race in America with black church leaders Wednesday to listen and learn and discuss the church's response to racial inequalities that are still affecting communities today. Now, when we look at the racial inequalities that has been happening in the country, It has not been a good thing in the South. Nationwide as well. We know that the North has problems too, but the South were very well known for the injustices that has been happening with the black community. And it's sad to say that a lot of these church leaders, especially the Southern Baptist Convention, they were proponents of a lot of the discriminations and injustices in the community. Now, it blows my mind that even back in those days, they can talk about being a lover of the Lord and a servant of Jesus Christ, but yet they had racist tendencies that discriminated and sometimes lynched. Sometimes those SBC members were KKK members as well. And it just blows my mind that somebody can talk about Christ in one mouth and talk about hating another people in another side of their mouth. So it's just ridiculous. And sadly to say, people have used religion throughout the years to justify their points on being discriminative against a race of people. Reading on, it says, Executive Committee President Ronnie Floyd, who is white, convened the online video conference with 5 black SBC pastors from different regions of the country to have a biblical conversation about race in America and the implications it's having on churches of our Southern Baptist Convention and our Great Commission work that we are doing together. You know, there's a saying that Sundays mornings are the most segregated time because you have on one side white churches meeting in congregation, and on the other side you have black churches meeting and congregating, and they usually call Sundays the most segregated time in America. About 25 years after the largest Protestant denomination in the United States apologized for its support for slavery during its founding, Floyd said that today about 23% of SBC churches are non-Anglo churches, with 4,000 of the denomination's 47,500 churches being African-American churches. You know, a lot of blacks end up being in the Baptist faith. A lot of times they became those faiths because during the slavery times, if the slave master was Baptist, the slave would be Baptist. If the slave master was Episcopalian, the slave would be Episcopalian as well. So a lot of stuff has been passed down through tradition, and this goes to these numbers that we're seeing here. As we are growing in racial diversity as a convention of churches, it is important that we listen to one another and learn from one another, Floyd said. We are walking through some very difficult times in American life as racial tension and strife continue to rise to levels of great concern for each of us. I believe that the Church of Jesus Christ must answer this moment in American history, and this is why we are having this conversation together today. So it's a great thing that this conversation is being had, because far too long people have been putting stuff on the back burner. They have been not wanting to discuss, hot issues, hot topics, so to speak. But these type of things must happen. Link up with what we are dealing with today. I agree with Tony Evans. If the church would have stood up again for righteousness and justice rather than oppression and slavery back in the day, we may not be here, said Williams, who served at his church for over 30 years. That's Mr. Marshall Williams, who's the senior pastor of Nazarene Baptist Church in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He said, I think it is imperative on the church today, especially cooperatively, and all of us of all ethnicities, especially our brethren of the lightest hue, to be able to speak to their concentric circle of contact, their sphere of influence, where laws are made that are deliberately contributing to the institutional and systemic racism. Williams added that what the U.S. is facing today in its push forward for racial equality is spiritual warfare. So, in the end of everything, the devil is behind all of this confusion and this miscommunication. And it's good that the SBC wants to communicate with the black leadership and discuss race and the discriminations. And reading here that they apologize, I think is fantastic, because there are some apologies of things, that's due. Systemic racism is still alive today. Redlining, if you look in the mortgage industry, they would segregate black folks to certain neighborhoods to keep them out of the more affluent, nicer neighborhoods. So systemic racism is still alive today. And the apology, I think, is great. Speaking of apologies, Chick-fil-A's Dan Cathy, he's the owner of Chick-fil-A, asked white Christians to repent, fight for black Americans in the wake of the police killings. So this is an article here. Chick-fil-A is a very good restaurant. I do admire the fact they work pretty much 6 days a week, and they're closed on Sundays to allow people to have their religious observations. And Mr. Cathy stated, Dan Cathy, conservative billionaire, CEO of fast food chain Chick-fil-A, urged white Christians to take advantage of the special moment in American history now to repent of racism and fight for their black brothers and sisters in the wake of ongoing protests over the police killings of Rayshard Brooks and other black Americans like George Floyd. That Rayshard Brooks, I saw that last week actually at night. He was in the drive-thru at Wendy's, and he was inebriated, and the cops and him got into a situation, and he was murdered just after the George Floyd situation. So, and I read it, they burnt that Wendy's. So there's a fever going on in the country, and Mr. Dan Cathy commented saying that he is urging his white Christians to repent. So with that being said, we're going to take a quick break, and I'm going to get right back with you on the GBC. Thank you for rejoining us here at the GBC. I am the Honorable WMII, covering stories for you around the world. Now, we're going to go over here in Africa. And this is an interesting story that I've read. It says the Saharan dust from Africa will stretch toward the United States, putting the hurricane season on pause. So, I know in the Middle East, there's always a thick dust. I always hear about these dust storms that it's like it covers, and it's just almost like a rainstorm, but it's like dust. And reading a little bit here from CNN Weather, it says, after a quick and active start to hurricane season, it looks like any significant tropical development is unlikely over the next week. It says it thanks to a significant area of Saharan dust seen in satellite imagery blowing off the west coast of Africa. Forecasting models show the dust moving across the tropics, the main area of tropical development, and into the Gulf of Mexico by this time next week. So it looks like we're going to have some dust storms touching the United States. And it reads that means it will travel over 5,000 miles, said CNN meteorologist Haley Brink. Large plumes of Saharan dust routinely track into the Atlantic Ocean from late spring into early fall, she says. Every so often, when the dust plume is large enough and trade winds set up just right, the dust can travel thousands of miles across the Atlantic and into the United States. And it states that the dust is visible. The dust is the visible part of the reduced tropical development potential area. It is the surly air and additional vertical wind shear along with the dust that are the driving factors in limiting tropical storm development. And this is very interesting. Ms. Brink also adds in addition and states, when the dust like this travels across the ocean, the dust particles high up in the atmosphere can scatter sunlight and create some of the most vivid sunsets. So, we have a dust storm whirring coming over here, and it's kind of throwing off the hurricane season, but nevertheless, just be prepared for that. Staying in Africa, it looks as if Mr. Akon is in the news as well. The singer, Akon. Akon reveals that he secured a $6 billion. I want to repeat, $6 billion contract to build futuristic cities in Senegal. I heard about this some weeks ago about Akon getting billions of dollars to have his own city that was named after him, and I think is like fantastic. You really don't hear of an average person climbing to the levels of success to have their own cities, and then on top of that, it's going to be a futuristic city, which is highly advanced. And we're going to read on this article here from BET. And also the phase 1 of his project is expected to be completed by the end of 2023. So that's just maybe 3 years off, if or less. Reading in a little bit about this story, it says Akon's futuristic city has been several years in the making. And on Tuesday, this mogul shared some big news. Taken to Instagram, Akon announced that he has secured a $6 billion construction contract to build a city in Senegal, according to a press release. Along with the announcement, Senegalese-American singer shared a highly detailed digital rendering of the futuristic city. So here's a photo here of the city Mr. Akon has. He's actually looking at doing some extremely big things. That's why I've been hearing a lot about, I've been approached about doing business in Africa. There's a big trend that Africans want to do business with Black Americans, and they're wanting Black Americans to do business in Africa. That's been something really heavily talked about in business circles. Per the press release, Akon entered a contract with KE International, a United States-based consultant and engineer firm, earlier this month. The company received $4 billion from investors to complete the first and second phases of building Akon City. Phase 1, is going to be completed very soon, just in 3 years. And it says this development comes after Akon revealed in January that he's finalized the agreement for the land on which Akon City will be built. The following month, he spoke to TMZ about his plans for the city, describing it as futuristic, self-sustaining economy that will be powered by the latest technologies. I don't want nothing from the old days, Akon said. I want it all to be based on tomorrow's technology and built for our future, he said. All the latest technology now is our instruments, minerals, and resources taken from Africa. I'm already in Africa. We can build everything in Africa without having to source anything from the outside. And that's interesting because Africa is full of mineral resources. It's rich and plentiful in everything that they need. So it is a great thing that they're actually taking advantage of the resources that are in their land, because far too much we're seeing that it's taken, other countries are coming in and taking the resources away from Africa. Now, getting into our main final story here, as you know, as I started at the top of the program about the Juneteenth celebrations, is going on nationwide, and there are some things about Juneteenth that, to be honest, the regular school never taught us about. We was taught that Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492, and they had a song about it as well. But as we research history, we realize a lot of that stuff was not facts. It's being plain and honest. It was not facts. And Juneteenth, I have 4 interesting facts about the celebration of Juneteenth, marking the end of slavery. So we're going to read this article here, and this is from the Christian Post by Mr. Michael Grabowski. And he had a great article here. And as you can see, the dress of those people here in the year of 1900 on this picture, and to look at how we've advanced is amazing, but we still have more work to do. It says, while Juneteenth is generally considered the longest running celebration for African American centered holidays, having first been observed in 1866, there has been times when it struggled to gain support. Economic and cultural forces led to a decline in Juneteenth activities and participants beginning in the early 1900s. So there are some people who have really tried to keep the Juneteenth celebrations alive, and thank goodness it's becoming on the forefront now. I know President Trump has also instituted, I guess, more interest in the subject, given that the fact that he's going to Tulsa, Oklahoma. And this article here says Tulsa, the next site of Trump's rally, has a place in memory of Black Americans. And it was a terrible memory because like I said earlier, their buildings were bombed, and it was really tough. Just a little bit on this article here. It says, why is Tulsa's history so allegorically powerful? Because it has showed the base lengths to which white Americans well into the 20th century will go to destroy Black lives and crush the hopes of Black people for a better life, literally into dust. And I just want to say that that's really bad because we had a lot of people after slavery, and even though they were oppressed 400 plus years, and those years that they were repressed, as soon as they were free, they came out, and a lot of the Black Americans became successful. They built a town in Tulsa, Oklahoma, with people called Black Wall Street, and during the time there was a depression, there was success going on in our communities as well. Other countries were bidding with Black businesses, and I must say that we are a resilient people. And given that the fact that we are a resilient people, nothing can hold us down. I'm extremely proud to be a Black American. I thank God for the chance for me to represent my Blackness here. And I most definitely will tell you that in the name of Jesus Christ, we shall continue to strive on. God bless you, and good night, America. And I love you, world.
Thank you for listening to the worldwide transmission of the GBC with the Honorable WMII.
The Honorable WMII, thanking all of my viewers and subscribers. I really appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. If you also want to contact us, you can reach us at thehonorablewm2@gmail.com. That's thehonorablewm2@gmail.com.